What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2021 predictions as the Wisconsin Badgers are up next. A really interesting team when you go back to last year and look at how they started the season. A team that looked like a top 10 team. They blew out Michigan, had an easy win over Illinois, and then they had a lot of COVID issues. They had injuries, had pretty much their whole wide receiver unit, it seemed like, was out at one point. And they kind of struggled in the middle of the season, and they came on pretty strong at the end, beat Minnesota in overtime, then had a decent bowl win over Wake Forest. So with Wisconsin, I think some people are just look at the record and they think, well, this team, they'll be okay, but they're not going to be anything great. But again, when this team is full strength, when you saw them at full strength in those first couple of games last year, you saw what they're capable of. And the more I look at this roster, the more I dig into this Wisconsin team, the more I feel like this is the best team in the Big Ten West. And also, the more, when you look at the schedule, you can see how this is the team that's the favorite in the Big Ten West. I think they're the clear favorites. A lot of people think, well, it's Wisconsin or Iowa. Maybe there's another team in there. To me, Wisconsin is the clear favorite just because of the way their schedule plays out. And we'll get to the schedule in just a second. But let's just see what everyone else is thinking about or predicting for Wisconsin. The FBI has them at 8.9 and 3.6. That would include, again, a potential conference championship game. Basically a 50% chance that Wisconsin wins the Big Ten West. A 9-3 regular season, something like that. Athlon has them at 9-3. The over-under is at 9.5, which I think is pretty fair. You've got some tough games on this schedule. I mean, you've got Penn State right out of the gate, Notre Dame, Iowa. There are some games, but it's hard for me when I just look at this schedule. It's hard for me to see this team losing many games this year. I mean, they're going to be loaded on defense, a lot of experience coming back. 3 out of 5 starters in the offensive line are back. Jalen Berger, I think they found their running back with him. Graham Mertz is probably the best quarterback, most talented quarterback that Wisconsin has had in a long time. Receivers, a lot of them coming back, and if they're healthy, it's just a different team. And so I think Wisconsin, if I had to go over or under, I think it's a pretty tough one. But I feel like it's more likely that they go 10-2 than it is that they go 9-3. Just because, again, when you look at the schedule, there's not many teams I think that are going to be able to beat them. And here is that schedule. It just sets up so well for them. Unless, if Penn State and Michigan turn out to be really good this year, then all of a sudden this schedule becomes pretty tough in the Big Ten. Which, I'm not talking about the overall schedule, just talking about the Big Ten schedule. I know Notre Dame is there in the non-conference. Penn State, I think, is going to be good this year. I think they're a top 20, maybe top 15 team. Michigan, probably not a top 20 team, but they have talent, so you never know. So if those two teams turn out to be really good, then okay, yeah, the schedule is pretty tough. Then it's going to be tough for them to get to 10 wins. But if they're similar to what they were last year, Wisconsin's going to have an advantage, I think, in both of those games, playing at home especially. And then they also get Iowa at home. They get Northwestern at home. They get Nebraska at home. Their toughest road game in the division is Minnesota at the end of the year. So I really just like the way the schedule sets up for them. But we're going to go game by game, starting with Penn State. I just did the Penn State predictions. I think that was the last team I did last week. And I said in that video, this is just a toss-up. This is a very evenly matched game, in my opinion. If the game was at Penn State, I'd pick Penn State. But because the game is at Wisconsin, I think that gives them enough of an advantage where they win this game. I think the two teams are pretty even. I think it's going to be a great game to start off the season. I think they beat Eastern Michigan as well. So I think they do get off to a 2-0 start here. That Penn State game, though, is definitely a swing game, a game that could go either way. I think the crowds are going to be crazy, especially early in the year, though. Fans are desperate to get back to the field, see their teams play. It's going to be a tough environment for Penn State to come in there. I think Wisconsin, that home field advantage is the difference, like I said. And then we have Notre Dame on a neutral field in Chicago on September 25th. This will be another game that's basically a toss-up. It's a game that I could see really going either way. Interesting that Jack Cohn is playing for Notre Dame now. That's just going to be an intriguing storyline there. Does that mean Wisconsin's defense is going to know how to deal with him because they've seen him in practice so much and they know so much about him? Does that give Wisconsin an advantage? We'll see. I think Notre Dame is a little bit more talented when you just look at the actual talent on their roster, although Wisconsin, of course, does a great job of developing players. Both teams are going to have good defenses. It's going to be a low-scoring game. And I say this in these prediction videos, don't get too hung up on all the individual games. because I get my predictions. I say, all right, this team's going to be 7-5 or 8-4 or whatever, and then I might move some games around to get the record that I want for another team, and that is exactly what happened here. I'm going to go with Notre Dame in this game. I think, again, it's a 50-50 game. Wisconsin has a great shot, but with Penn State being such a tough game, Notre Dame being such a tough game, it's hard for me to pick Wisconsin to win both of those games. Also, I kind of needed another win for Notre Dame. So there's a lot that goes into this. It's not simply just saying which team's better, which team's going to win this game. When you have to do predictions for every single team, you have to take a lot of things into account. So I'm going with Notre Dame here. I absolutely think Wisconsin has a great shot to win it. It's just one that could go either way. But again, I go back to the Penn State game. That's one that Wisconsin could lose. So out of those two games, I think they split. They get Michigan next on October 2nd. I actually only put September 2nd. That should be October 2nd. The game is at home for Wisconsin. Again, home field advantage is going to be huge. I think Michigan not as good as Penn State this year. It'll be a fairly close game, but I think Wisconsin kind of pulls away in the second half. They get this win over Michigan. Maybe not as easy as it was last year, but I don't really see Michigan winning this game. But who knows? Illinois is up next on October the 9th on the road, a veteran team. They just had a bunch of players transfer the other day. But still, going on the road, Illinois upset them in the past, so you don't want to overlook this team. I just think Wisconsin's too good. I think they beat Illinois. And then there's that game against Army on October 16th, kind of a late season non-conference game. It was interesting that they play Army so late in the year. And this is one of those games, it just kind of feels like one of those games Wisconsin could get upset. Go back to, BYU, go back to Illinois like I was talking about. It seems like when Wisconsin's doing really well, they tend to just randomly get upset in the middle of the season. Army's a tough team to prepare for. This will be a tough, hard-fought game, low scoring, a lot of running of the football in this matchup. But I think Wisconsin finds a way. It's probably a close game that they have to really, really fight in the fourth quarter to win. But I do think they beat Army. And then after that, they're going to go on the road to Purdue. Purdue, an interesting team. A team that, we keep waiting on them to get better, and they just haven't done it. Playing on the road could be kind of tough, but I think Wisconsin's the better team. I'm going to give them the win there. And then Iowa on October the 30th, the game that I think a lot of people would say is the game that will determine the Big Ten West. The winner of this game will go to the Big Ten championship game. I think Wisconsin's a little bit better than Iowa. I think they're going to have a little bit of an advantage up front on the offensive and defensive lines. That should be enough for them to win this game, plus home field advantage. It's not going to be an easy win. It's going to be a low-scoring game, just like some of these others. I do think Wisconsin will win at home, though. I've got them beating Iowa. Rutgers there on November 6th. This could actually be a tough game. Right after playing Iowa, you got Northwestern the next week. You might overlook Rutgers a little bit going on the road. This Rutgers team is going to be pretty good again this year. They surprised a lot of people last year, including myself. I think they're going to be a team that's fighting for a bowl eligibility this year. Another perfect example of a spot where Wisconsin could get upset. When you look at their history, this is one of those spots where it wouldn't shock me if they were upset by Rutgers, but I just think they're too good. I think Graham Mertz at quarterback gives them something that they haven't had in the past, and because of that, they beat Rutgers in a pretty close game. I'm really not very high on Northwestern. They're going to be a well-coached team, but I just don't see it with them with all that they lost. I mean, they lost a ton of production. I think Wisconsin takes care of business at home against the Wildcats. Then you've got Nebraska on November 20th. Nebraska is a team that I think will actually be better this year. Offensive line, defensive line, they seem like they're getting better. I think they're going to be able to run the football better. It really comes down to Adrian Martinez. What can he do at that quarterback spot? Will they be able to challenge a team like Wisconsin? I think they keep it close for a half, maybe even 3/4, but Wisconsin at home will pull away late. They get the win and improve to 10-1. Now you've got Minnesota here at the end of the season. Last year it was an overtime win for Wisconsin. I think people were kind of forgetting about Minnesota. This was a team a couple of years ago that was really good, and they've got a lot of pieces coming back. Tanner Morgan back at quarterback. I just think with all of the hype for Wisconsin at this point, they've only lost one game. You're talking about the college football playoff potentially. Can they beat Ohio State? All of those types of things. It's just the perfect spot for an upset late in the year. Minnesota just desperate for a big win for their program. I think they get it. I think we're going to see an upset here. Minnesota upsets Wisconsin, giving them their second loss of the season. I think Wisconsin's I do think Wisconsin is the better team, but upsets happen in college football, and this is just where I think we see one. So 10-2 for Wisconsin. Again, don't get hung up on the individual games. They could absolutely beat Minnesota, but at the same time, they could lose to Penn State, or they could lose to Rutgers on the road. You just never know. But when you look at the schedule again, it's just hard to see this team doing worse than 10-2. I mean, I think that they absolutely will get to 10-2, maybe even better, maybe even 11-1. And I think it's even possible that if that passing game can kind of give them another dimension on offense, it wouldn't shock me to see Wisconsin go undefeated this year. Their schedule sets up really well, like I said, and I just think that this team is going to be as good or really close to as good as every team, maybe even better than every team that they play on this schedule. Problem is, it's hard to play a perfect game for 12 games, and I think just with a tough game against Notre Dame and then an upset late against Minnesota, they lose a couple of games. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Give me your thoughts on Wisconsin down in the comments below. Give me your predictions. How do you think the season's going to go for the Badgers? Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.